Hello, and welcome to the True Story channel. Thank you for taking a moment to be here with us today. The story you are about to hear may seem simple at first, but sometimes the quietest moments reveal the deepest truths about people, relationships, and the value of self-respect. And if you stay with this story until the end, I believe you may understand something powerful about how easily kindness can be mistaken for weakness, and how one quiet decision can change the direction of an entire life. Have you ever watched someone reach into your purse, take your credit card, and say it as if it belonged to them all along? And even worse, imagine the person you were about to marry, standing right there, saying nothing. That was the moment everything became clear to me. What happened in that kitchen was not loud or dramatic. No one shouted, no one argued. But sometimes the most unsettling truths appear in the quietest rooms. It happened on a warm summer afternoon in Tacoma, inside the Harper family kitchen. Sunlight slipped through the window and spread across the old wooden table, catching faint marks left by years of use. The air carried the mild scent of dish soap and leftover coffee, and somewhere in the house, a clock ticked slowly, steady and indifferent to the tension quietly forming in the room. I stood near the kitchen counter when Rachel Harper, my fiancé's younger sister, casually reached for my purse. She did not hesitate. She did not ask. She simply opened it as if it were her own. Her hand moved through the contents until she pulled out my credit card. The same card I had quietly used to help their family more times than anyone in that room probably remembered. Rachel lifted the card between two fingers and gave a small smile that felt almost practiced. "Family shares things," she said lightly, as if the sentence explained everything. I turned toward Daniel Harper, the man I was supposed to marry in just 1 month. He stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if something there had suddenly become very important. He said nothing. And that silence was not new. Over the past 3 years, I had come to know it well. When his father went through heart surgery, and I quietly covered groceries for weeks, Daniel stayed silent. When Rachel once joked during dinner that maybe I was only interested in Daniel's income, he stayed silent then too. And now, as his sister stood in front of me holding my credit card, Daniel remained exactly the same, silent. You might expect anger in a moment like that. You might expect raised voices or sharp words. But what surprised me most was how calm I felt. I simply took a slow breath and leaned lightly against the counter. Because the truth was, none of them in that kitchen knew what I had already done earlier that morning. And when the day finally revealed what that decision meant, every face in that room was going to change. Have you ever felt the exact moment when a relationship quietly changes, when something inside you finally understands what your mind has been avoiding for a long time? For me, that moment did not happen in the Harper family kitchen. It began hours earlier that same morning, in the stillness of my apartment in Seattle. The sky outside was pale and overcast, the kind of quiet gray morning that makes the city feel distant and muted. I stepped onto my small balcony with my phone in my hand, the banking app already open on the screen. The account I was looking at had existed for 3 years. 3 quiet years that had unfolded alongside my relationship with Daniel Harper. At the beginning, everything I did felt natural. When Daniel struggled with his student loan payments, I helped him cover a few months. When his father came home from heart surgery and medical bills weighed heavily on the family, I paid for groceries for weeks without mentioning it to anyone. Later, there were smaller things, utilities, insurance, little expenses that slowly added up but never seemed important enough to discuss. I believed this was simply what people did when they planned to build a future together. But over time, the tone around those moments changed. Gratitude slowly disappeared, replaced by expectations so subtle it almost went unnoticed. What had once felt like kindness gradually began to feel assumed, as if my support were no longer help but responsibility. Standing on that balcony that morning, watching the slow movement of cars far below, I finally allowed myself to see the pattern clearly. The realization was quiet, but unmistakable. I opened a new account at a different bank and transferred every dollar into it. The process took less than a minute. Then, I placed a call to freeze my credit card immediately and asked the bank to notify me if anyone else attempted to use it that day. When the call ended, the city was still waking beneath the grey sky, and for the first time in a long while, I felt strangely certain about what was coming next. What happens when someone who is used to spending your money suddenly discovers they cannot anymore? The answer unfolded quietly in the Harper family kitchen only minutes later. Rachel was still standing near the refrigerator, scanning the shelves as if nothing unusual had happened. The afternoon sunlight continued to stretch across the wooden table, while the low hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Then she straightened, pulled my credit card from her pocket, and waved it, casually, in the air. "Let's just use Olivia's card and order pizza," she said, as if the decision required no thought at all. No one questioned it. Rachel opened a food delivery app on her phone and began selecting items with quick, confident taps. I watched without saying a word. She entered the card number and pressed confirm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, her expression shifted slightly. The screen displayed a simple message: "Transaction declined." She frowned and tried again, carefully entering the numbers a second time. Another pause. The same message appeared: "Declined." By the third attempt, irritation crept into her voice. "Why isn't this working?" she muttered. That was when Daniel finally lifted his head and looked at me with uncertainty. "Olivia?" he said quietly. I leaned back against the counter and answered calmly, "Because I froze the card." The words settled into the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Rachel laughed sharply. "You're making this into something ridiculous," she said. I turned to Daniel instead. "Do you remember how much I've helped your family during the last 3 years?" He did not respond. I continued, my voice steady. "I helped with your student loans. I covered groceries after your father's surgery. I even paid your car insurance for 3 months." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Then Rachel's phone rang. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. She answered and placed the call on speaker. A calm voice filled the kitchen. "This is the bank's security department. We detected a possible unauthorized transaction attempt on this card." Rachel's face drained of color. I met her gaze and spoke quietly. "Yes. I asked them to call if anyone else tried to use it. When does a relationship truly end? Not when people argue, not when voices rise, but in the quiet moment, when one person finally understands that nothing left inside them wants to keep fighting." That realization settled over the Harper family kitchen like a slow shadow after the bank's voice faded from Rachel's phone. No one spoke. Even the soft sound of water running from the sink stopped as Daniel's mother turned and stared. I picked up my purse from the counter, the small movement somehow louder than everything that had just happened. Daniel looked at me as if something unfamiliar had suddenly appeared in front of him. "Olivia, what are you doing?" he asked, confusion tightening his voice. I met his eyes calmly, feeling a strange steadiness I had not felt in a long time. There's one more thing you should know, I said. He frowned slightly, waiting. This morning, I made another call. The room seemed to hold its breath. What call? Daniel asked. I answered without hesitation. I called the wedding venue. Rachel stopped moving entirely. Daniel's mother slowly turned away from the sink. Daniel blinked, struggling to understand. What are you saying? He asked. I spoke the words clearly this time. I cancelled the wedding. For a moment, the kitchen felt frozen in place. The deposit was not refundable. I already knew that when I made the call earlier that morning. But standing there now, I realized something surprising. Losing that money meant almost nothing compared to what I had just regained. My freedom, my sense of self. I slipped my purse over my shoulder and walked toward the door. Behind me, Daniel's voice followed, uncertain and suddenly urgent. Olivia. Wait. I paused only long enough to open the door. Outside, the Seattle afternoon was calm, sunlight touching the street while cars moved slowly past like nothing had changed. Yet everything had, because for the first time in years, I was no longer carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. Thank you for listening and sharing this moment with the True Story channel. And perhaps the real question is this: what happened after Olivia walked away that afternoon? That is a story that might reveal even more than the one you have just heard.